So I move on now to the message for today. Our theme for the year 2021 is Timeless Wisdom, Evolutionary Vision. And the theme for the month of June is called The Soul's Call. And the theme or the message for today is called Lean into the Discomfort. Now, I want to first address like the context of the soul's call. And one of the notes we have for this is from Carl Jung, who said, who looks outside dreams, who looks inside awakens. And of course, our journey is a little bit of both, right? It's a little bit of looking inward, and it's a little bit of dreaming, visioning, catching something that's beyond our, the limits of our current consciousness. And so the question for you is, do you answer your soul's call, or do you let it go to voicemail? Right? So each time you choose to heal, you choose to correct course, you're answering your soul's call. Each time you choose love or compassion or connection or circulation or creation, you're answering your soul's call. Now, as you answer your soul's call, all of us other folks are answering our soul's call to the best of our abilities as well. And as each is really committed and conscious of that, collectively it contributes to an evolution of collective consciousness. It's a combination of lights that lights the world more brightly. So imagine, if you will, this thing that might be a little different than that answer, that positive, that consciousness building part, that feeling good part about answering your soul's call. Imagine if there's some discomfort around that. Now imagine, if you will, that discomfort is a kind of teacher. It's a kind of a guide, a guru, a way shower. And so the question becomes, if you're sending that call to voicemail, what is it that you're avoiding? What is it that you're diverting? What is it that you're distracting, rejecting, resisting? And are you avoiding this because there is pain, there is discomfort? Or it might even be that you are anticipating. It might just be that there is some change. And again, you're basing that anticipated pain maybe on seeing that in someone else by observation, by reason, by intuition. And on a personal level, that means that you could be, avoiding sending to voicemail certain people, certain places, certain things, certain activities, certain work, play, relationships, money. It also can mean that there is a collective resistance to something. Maybe you're resisting something around politics or service or power or activism or money, even in the collective. And it raises a number of questions, right? Now, I'm not proposing answers to these kind of questions. These answers are meant for you to discover on your own. And that means that that there's going to be a process involved with this, potentially maybe some spiritual practices. And the first question that arises from this topic is that, from the history of humanity, humans have been dealing with relieving pain, right? And that's always become an ethical question. And, my version of it is, if I am taking away pain, am I taking away the healing, right? And then to extend that metaphysically, am I less or more divine if I feel pain? Do I numb all the pain because that seems to be in opposition to my perception of my divinity in the moment? And then you could extend that even further and say, well, if a little bit of pain is advancing my consciousness, maybe a lot of pain will advance it more, right? So you get into some really faulty thinking around this. And then, to extend that to the communal, what if collectively, we find the magic pill? We're able to relieve all form of disease, and therefore all form of pain, and therefore of all form of suffering, at least around the body temple. Does that mean we're just left with psychic pain? And is that psychic pain always going to manifest as a bodily pain? Or in addition to, are we clinging to a limited perception around our body and the pain that might be associated with our body to avoid that deeper psychic pain? Now, if you feel pain, if you have some form of discomfort, I first want to point out that it doesn't make you any less of the spiritual being that you are. You know, we're on this sort of, you know, human phase of our soul's journey, as I have like to point out from time to time. And therefore, certain human things are going to come into our spiritual journey. And so Khalil Gibran puts it this way, says, your pain is the breaking of the shell that encloses your understanding. I think that's very interesting. And Leonard Cohen put it this way, it says, ring the bells that still can ring, forget your perfect offering. There is a crack in everything. That's how the light gets in. You know, so at your essence, you are pure spirit. And this human phase of your soul's journey is dedicated to, on some level, to some respects, it's dedicated to healing as much as you can. It's dedicated to being as genuine and authentic as you possibly can. It's dedicated to shining as much of your light as you possibly can. It's dedicated to loving as much as you can. It's dedicated to being as compassionate as you can for yourself and for others. That's quite a lot, I feel. Now, the proposition is, could there be a life lesson, an opportunity to heal or grow in consciousness in what you perceive to be aversive, what you perceive to resist, those uncomfortable emotions that flow, and those uncomfortable emotions that might flow from false beliefs of lack, of limitation, of scarcity, of density, of separation, of stagnation? Is it possible the pain dissipates to a more manageable discomfort, in which case you can mindfully integrate those occasions of pain into discomfort, following those natural ebbs and flows that are part of your spiritual growth? And those ebbs and flows obviously carry you to new vistas. They carry you to new depths and expanses of consciousness. So I will share a little story with you, if I might. I spent some time in New Hampshire growing up, and as an 11-year-old, I remember taking a trip to the Gunstock ski area near Lake Winnipesaukee in New Hampshire. And more of a novice skier, but I was kind of relegated to the lower trails. They were easy for me to handle. But there was this allure of going to the top of the mountain. And it was a little worrisome to me. It was a little uncomfortable, I might say. And the reason was, this is what the bottom of the chairlift looked like, often. And because it was on Lake Winnipesaukee, it was often shrouded in fog and clouds and snow. And this particular chairlift at the time was one of the longest in the world. It was over a mile-long ride from the bottom to the top. It was very cold and, I thought, treacherous, right? But once I accepted that level of discomfort, and again, this was all in my mind, just as real to me as, you know, something that might be a body injury. But it was, you know, working through the discomfort of the cold and the fog and the wind and the snow. And then you get to the top, and this is what you see. You see this beautiful view. You see this great snow. The wind and the cold and the fog are gone. Now you end up skiing back down through it to get to the bottom. But that was what I had to overcome to get to this level of consciousness, to have this level of experience. So I think the most enlightened humans, at least from what I have learned about them, have experienced some pain on their journey, whether it was their own pain or something that they observed. Now, this pain is inherent, supposedly, in the individualization of your soul or the development of a positive personality. You know, it's just inherent, it's just intrinsic to this human phase of our soul's journey. But I will say this, the principle is not bound by precedent. That's a fancy little phrase we have in the science of mind, which means just because it occurred this way for someone else before doesn't mean it has to occur this way for me, right? Just because someone else grew a lot through their personal pain doesn't mean that I have to have a bunch of personal pain in order to grow a lot. You know, one person's pain on their path is not my pain on my path. And there's no way for me to duplicate that scenario, including the pain, in order to duplicate their growth. My path is unique to me as your path is unique to you, whatever that entails. Now, in A Course in Miracles, it says, you know, you can learn, you can grow through joy, or you can grow through pain, and the choice is yours. Now, the other requisite part of this is that you're learning, you're going to learn, you're going to grow, your consciousness is expanding. And oftentimes you have some choice around whether that growth, that learning, that expansion of consciousness is through painful, uncomfortable means, or whether it's through joy, through love, through something positive. And remember too that this pain is something that you are moving through, right? It doesn't come to stay. It doesn't come to pitch a tent. It comes to pass, as the biblical phrase might be. So, you know, young or old, everyone experiences some degree of pain, and everyone is healing and learning and growing in consciousness as a function of it. One of the ways that we in the Science of Mind talk about this aspect of growth is, you know, what are your spiritual practices that help move you through this uncomfortable experience, move you through the discomfort, not to skip it, but to actually utilize it as part of your spiritual journey. And we have spiritual practices that help you through this process. Meditation, treatment or affirmation or prayer, doing some form of spiritual study, journaling, visioning, being of sacred service, seeing your spiritual counselor, giving as a spiritual practice, and doing as you're doing today, being part of the beloved community. Now, of these, what pertain to the theme today and leaning into that discomfort, I think what stands out as spiritual practices that lend themselves to this process are be journaling, being of sacred service, and seeing your spiritual counselor, seeing your practitioner, having that be a central part of your spiritual growth. And the reason I say that, remember in Science of Mind speak, feelings are inward experience. They are a cause of something else, sometimes emotion, sometimes other creative expressions. They are enduring, they are your direct contact with living spirit. Versus emotions, which are the effect often of feeling. There's something outward, demonstrable, objective. Another person can notice some emotional expression that a person is having. They are temporary, and most importantly, they are informative. So those emotions have information. So how many of you have cried, right? So that is the emotional expression, right? Yes. How many have cried tears of pain? How many have cried tears of sadness? How many have cried tears of joy, right? So the emotional flow is the same, the flow of lacrimal fluid, as Daffy Duck would say. But the cause of that emotional experience can be vastly different. But the emotional experience, that those tears, that crying, is transforming you. It's transfiguring, it's transmuting something. And often that pain is correlated to some part of the body or some aspect of the psyche. it's important then to, in your process, maybe to notice what the cause of that bodily pain might be, or what the cause of that psychic pain might be. Now, do that so that I can heal, so that you can heal, so that I can correct course, so that I can jettison some stinking thinking. And the practitioner is the one, that process with the practitioner is really important to help you follow that path, especially during challenging times. And those challenges often come with this element of pain that is sometimes hard to manage, sometimes hard to negotiate. But our practitioners, our spiritual counselors, are highly skilled in being with you, supporting you in this process. Now, the other part of this aspect of spiritual practice are the qualities, the character, that inward creative feeling. So here, I just look down this list of, and this is not limited, right? There's certainly a lot more feelings, therefore qualities of God, that I can feel, that you can feel. But if I take just a few at random, like generosity or clarity or peace, right? Notice that there isn't necessarily a pain that will lead, a discomfort that leads to those qualities or those characters. It also stands to reason that by simply affirming in the midst of some pain or discomfort, these qualities actually might cause the opposite. They might become a trigger. They might conjure something. They say, well, my life lacks peace. There is an absence of peace in my life, which is tending to point more towards the discomfort or pain, not necessarily the quality of peace, right? And at the same time, I'm not suggesting that in the presence of this pain or absence of peace, that you somehow force yourself to affirm its constructive, positive opposite. I have an unpeaceful life, so I'm just going to sit there and affirm my brains out about having peace in my life. Now, eventually that might become the practice, but if done before you're ready for it, and before you've really brought out of that uncomfortable experience all that it has to offer, we call that a bypass, right? We're sort of setting aside a lesson that's in front of me in order to replace it with a less comfortable feeling, or at least the idea of a less comfortable feeling. And it works, but it's temporary. It's temporary relief for minor existential pain, right? But at the right point in my process, as I have been with the pain for a little bit, then that is the natural step to take, to say, I've processed this discomfort has carried my understanding, my consciousness to a new level, and therefore this is the moment that I call forth more peace in my life, right? So there is kind of a natural flow to this, at least I think there is, at least there has been for me. And of course, A Miracle says that you're going to cry the exact number of tears that your life experience, your challenges, your pains, your trials, your tribulations have brought up in your life. And those tears represent or part of an energetic movement within you. And those kind of negative emotions, whatever they might be, they come in waves and washes. And certainly as the crest of that wave of emotion passes, in its wake, there is a certain openness, right? It's as if that wave or that wash, those tears have flushed from all the nooks and crannies of my being, any false thoughts or beliefs in separation thinking. And as that happens, at least for me, I just kind of feel this fog lifting. And then I have that elevation moment. I have arrived at the top of the mountain, and I can see all those beautiful vistas. And in that moment too, I'm able to create more of that love intelligence that is within you, within me, that surrounds you and I, all of us, right? So in general, as we mentioned earlier, I think it was Gary mentioned earlier, it's important to pay attention to what has your attention, right? Rather than trying to distract yourself from it. And we have developed as humans lots of ways to distract ourselves from what has got our attention. And again, that perhaps that a pain that you downplay, that you skip over, that you avoid or resist, even if you're just trying to affirm your way out of it, sometimes it's better to try to stay with that pain, that discomfort, to lean into it in order to really get out of that all the information it has to offer. Now, Stephen Andrea Levine wrote this wonderful book that most of us who have studied studied to be practitioners and ministers, called Who Dies, right? So some of you might be familiar with it. And in Who Dies, one of the more remarkable things are pain meditations that they have developed over the years. And it's kind of based around this premise that what you resist persists. We've heard that before, right? And they're really kind of radical because the patient studies in the book are folks of all different ages and stations in life who are facing death, right? They're facing the end of their human expression, their human phase on this planet. And oftentimes they're in quite a bit of pain as they move through that process. So to allow that patient, to be more present with this magnificent transformation they're going through, although it is sad and it is potentially a little scary for people, is to actually go into that pain. Now, part of it was too so that people could reduce their pain medications, just to be more clear about what they're going through. But it was very interesting that these meditations really have people go into the pain. How many have done that, where you've got a pain and you're focusing on something other than the pain? Might be a useful technique, but in this case, not so much. But to go into that pain in order for it to soften, to loosen that pain, to set it flowing, to make it a little more light-filled, and therefore maybe to better understand that or the more general circumstance and condition of your life. So they're really powerful, and I had to study those and read those many, many times just to sort of get the feel and the flavor of it, because it was so unusual. It was so different for me at where I was in my spiritual journey. And so the other piece that is kind of important, I feel, along this theme of lean into the discomfort is, we'd say, be careful what you ask for. Why do we say that? Be careful what you ask for, because you might just get it, right? And it is similar in gratitude, right? Be careful of what you are grateful or thankful, because we also say what? Gratitude is the anointing of increase. As Reverend Sunshine says, what you appreciate appreciates. So a lot of times people, as an exercise, say, well, do you have a gratitude journal? And the gratitude journal say, list 10 things you're grateful for today. At some point, you might only have 5, but to stretch the list out to 10, you start to include things that you're really not all that grateful for, right? And the same is true with suffering. The same is true with pain. People often have magnificent advances in their consciousness through what are outwardly very painful, challenging, uncomfortable experiences in their lives. And they will tend to give gratitude toward not the transformation, but the vehicle that drove them to that transformation, which might be the pain. And therefore, unwittingly, they are planning some stinking thinking around pain being necessary for spiritual growth or consciousness. So again, it's okay to be grateful for the expansion of consciousness that's taken place in your life, but it's also important to be clear about that's the point, that's the part you are grateful for. And you can set aside, good, bad, or indifferent, the vehicle, the methods, the practices, whatever that got you there, right? Without judgment, you just say, I'm grateful to get to this level of love, this level of compassion, right? It's also important to say that you have a sort of commitment on your path and on your journey to stay present with whatever has got your attention, at least to the best of your abilities, right? Sometimes you're going to be stretched to endure a certain amount of discomfort, a certain amount of pain. That's okay. I and no one else is expecting or asking you to go beyond that, right? You go to that level to which you are going to glean the information, glean the lesson, the message of that experience. So frequently in this process, forgive yourself and forgive others. We're all on this journey together, this human phase of our soul's journey. We're all making the same kinds of choices, having the same kinds of experiences, as Reverend Sunshine often likes to use, just like me, just like you. And it's important then to engage in that forgiveness process that I've highlighted before, to get to that moment of choice, of disconnect in your mind's eye, and to choose again, to redo that choice at that moment so that you are choosing love and light and connection, to correct course in your mind's eye. And in those instances of any pain or despair, have that deep compassion for yourself and others. And I will leave you today with this version of this affirmation: I am open to discomfort being a teacher. Well, peace and blessings, everyone. Thank you so much.